Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at our second summer reading discussion series. I'm Miani Feelings from the cast of the first national tour of Mean Girls, and I'm so excited to be back here today with some of my fellow castmates and crew from tour and Broadway, as well as our fearless leader, Ms. Tina Fey, who you all know is our book writer and co-creator. And we're all here to talk to Kylie Reed, author of Such a Fun Age. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Hi, I'm Megan Masako Haley, and I play Gretchen on the tour.
Hi guys, I'm Miles McHale. I'm in the ensemble in the Mean Girls on Broadway.
What's up, guys? My name is Renee Rapp, and I am in the Broadway cast of Mean Girls.
And I'm Andre Gonzalo. I'm on the wardrobe crew for Broadway Mean Girls.
And I'm Tina Fey, and like Nanny said, I'm the book writer. And Andre, I'm so excited that we have someone from the crew here. I love that we're widening our berth. It's awesome.
Yay!
To meet you, Kylie. I'm so thrilled to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. Sorry, I didn't say my name before. I'm Kylie. I wrote Such a Fun Age. I'm really pumped to be here. Yeah.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. And we want to say thank you to all the fans out there for, again, submitting so many thoughtful and interesting questions. And of course, for reading along with us. We're going to try to cover a broad range of the questions in the discussion today, as well as in our ongoing Instagram post. But first, I'm going to introduce Kylie, tell you a little bit about her. An Arizona native, Kylie Reed is a recent graduate of Iowa Writers Workshop, where she is the recipient of the Truman Capote Fellowship. Her writing has been featured in the New York Times, Playboy, WSJ Magazine, Plowshares, December, New South, and Lumina, where her short story was the first place winner of the 2017 Flash Prose Contest. Her New York Times bestselling debut novel, Such a Fun Age, is currently in development by Lena Waithe's Hillman Grad Productions and Sight Unseen Pictures. Kylie lives in Philadelphia. Welcome, Kylie. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to answer some questions and talk about the book. Yeah.
Awesome. So as a reminder, we kicked off our book club last month with Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give. It was a really great opportunity for us to talk about race and racism in America, both amongst ourselves here at Mean Girls and with you, the fans. Since the May 25th death of George Floyd, the protests have continued. The conversation has grown and more people around the globe are joining in. As with last time, before we jump into the discussion of the book, I'd like to give you all a chance to talk a little bit about your experiences these last few months, whether it's about protests you've attended, learning you've begun exploring, self-reflection, or just feelings. Kylie, let's start with you.
It's a great question. It's been an interesting time in quarantine dealing with all of these things, and I think that a lot of Black Americans can relate that when these things first started happening, it's like the week of a breakup where you're just crying the whole time and just really emotional. But then that moves into anger, which doesn't feel great, but it allows for a lot more actionable items. And so I am not protesting, as I've had pneumonia twice in the past 5 years, and so I'm not going outside at all. But thankfully, there are ways that I can support. Especially, I think financially is the way to go right now. It's a strange thing in that, when something like this happens, a big response is, okay, let me, consume Black art and Black things. And I completely understand, that inclination. At the same time, I hope it goes further than that. But at the same time, I was like, let's hit these Black-owned bookstores in Philadelphia. And so Uncle Bobby's and Harriet's they're so great. I launched my book there, and Harriet's is in Fishtown. And so I've tried to use this tiny platform that I have to support these Black-owned bookstores because they mean a lot to me, and this is a really hard time for them. And so that's where I've been centering my focus.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, I ordered your book from Uncle Bobby's.
So happy. That's great.
There's we don't have the name of the website. We'll find it later and we'll put it up because there is a website you can find where you can order from small bookshops around the country. Maybe it's bookshop.org. I could be wrong. Anyway, yeah, I think it's we all continue to ride this emotional roller coaster of feeling like we're wanting to be a part of positive change, and then sometimes also like being stuck home in quarantine for the most part. A tiny thing that I've been trying to do, it might be helpful to others, is every time I'm tempted to buy something stupid off the internet, I try to instead immediately go donate that money. So just to try to have some small action every day. And that, yeah, that's, and then just keeping ears and eyes open as much as humanly possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think something that I'm home with my family right now, and something that all of us collectively have been trying to do is sort of like what you were saying, Kylie, is keep the momentum. Because I think you know, especially like for our generation, it's super easy to get really, really, really invested for like 5 seconds, and then we taper off and go back to our normal lives, especially like living in privilege. And my family and I, like my dad, mom, little brother, and myself, we've all been trying to do daily check-ins of like, okay, cool, what did I notice today? Like for me, I'm an empath by nature, so something that I check in with myself and also like with my dad, because we think very similarly or along those lines, is like, all right, where was I uncomfortable today? Like, where did I feel a sense of like, ooh, that makes me uncomfortable? And then like, why did that make me uncomfortable? And then how do I fix why it made me uncomfortable? So I think just like having honest and open conversations, not only like online, because it's awesome and it should continue to happen, but like in white spaces, like in the house. And that's been really helpful to all of us, because we are different generations, and we can help each other in different ways.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I think Andre was talking to me.
Sorry, I'm muted.
Oh, okay.
But and I was going to agree with what Renee said there, that I think I've become, since George Floyd died, aware of all the white spaces that I inhabit, and particularly the opportunity that I have to reach people that, like my family, that may not be getting, you know, as a diverse experience as we get in New York City. So, you know, taking the opportunity to kind of say, hey, let me point out a different side of this situation, you know, depending on the sort of media sources that they're consuming. I went out and marched around Gay Pride, which was a really exciting experience. A wonderful sort of cross section of folks. There's something really great about hitting streets and seeing the action in action. But I also agree that we have to, you know, donate. You have to kind of balance that out also with donating. Money is so great in that it is kind of open, you know, and it can strategically target, you know, the systemic change that needs to happen.
Awesome. Miles?
I was just going to piggyback off that. I didn't protest as much. I went into the pandemic recovering from a broken wrist. So I've just been in physical therapy and stuff. And now it's better. But the pandemic definitely, coupled with the protests and the death of George Floyd, definitely, as Renee said as well, allowed me to really take notice of the spaces I was in and who and what is being said to me, and just really allowed me to take a clear step back and be like, let's talk about the points of view and the changes that we can make. And so, yes, like definitely talking with my parents, talking with my aunts and uncles who are of other generations has been really eye-opening. And also I've been trying to be a good voice in that conversation. But yeah, it's been a little bit more self-reflective for me.
Yeah. Megan?
Yeah, I think I've spent a lot of this time reflecting on how I've been complicit in my adjacency to whiteness. And like, even though that's not, like, I don't identify obviously as a white person, I can see now the ways in which I've benefited from systems of power that we have. And so I've been trying to think of ways that I can use that to bring other people up with me, like in the future, which is a power that I didn't acknowledge that I had before these last few months of just like really some soul searching of like what I can do to help make change.
That's amazing. Thank you all so much for sharing that. Now we're gonna move on to some questions from the fans. There's a bunch of great questions, both for Kylie and the Mean Girls team. We're gonna start with a question we got from a lot of the different fans, which is, what inspired you to write this story? And also, if there are any real life events that the book is based on, let us know.
Great question. Good starting point. Yes. I'll be really honest and say, for me, it's always about storytelling and the characters. I have to be obsessed with it, and I love the dynamic that three people create in a story. I love awkward moments a lot, and I love that the dynamic of three people just makes everything a little bit off kilter. You know, from movies like Moonlight with three people, or even what is the other one? My Best Friend's Wedding, which I watched the other day, which holds up so well. Anything that has, you know, three people kind of fighting for that ownership. And then as soon as you bring in domestic work, themes of history of slavery and ownership come to the forehead, you know, no matter how much your babysitter is paid or how close you guys are. And so it was obviously just like a really rich place for that. So I wanted to tell a really awkward plot-driven story about a woman who's figuring out her life and doesn't have, you know, this passion at the end waiting for her. I was a nanny for a long time, and so that definitely filtered through a lot of this, the feeling of working in somebody else's home, the feeling of sometimes feeling like you're really part of the family, and sometimes dealing with comments where you're like, ooh, that hurt, okay, just gonna keep on trucking through. And I also didn't have health insurance for a long period of that time, and so I had writing at the end. I knew I wanted to write, and I still found the whole thing really, really difficult. But I feel like there's so many people who were just kind of like, I'm not sure what I want to do, so we'll see. And I wanted to see what that looks like for somebody who doesn't have this driving force, and kind of watch the people around her, you know, get a little squirmy at her anti-careerism. And so obviously the first chapter has this event of racial bias with the cell phone. And I mean, I feel like I couldn't help but be inspired by seeing things on the news and seeing how these issues are captured. And so in some ways, this is a very old story between, you know, a white mother and a Black caregiver, but the presence of the phone and how we respond to it, I think is really interesting. And that's where ownership of who owns that and what happens when the internet owns that. All of that was a big source of inspiration.
Yeah. Annika wants to know what emotions you felt when you were writing the book.
Oh man, I don't want to sound crazy, but I'm a bit clinical when I'm writing. I feel like I'm feeling nothing. I'm just like trying to see the story and plot for what it is, and almost not fall too in love with my characters, because then I'm too nice to them and I don't, you know, take away those wins whenever they have them. I will say recently I've been feeling different things towards the characters in the novel as I talk about it. I think about if Amira was a babysitter now with the pandemic and how much she would be struggling. I know when I was a nanny, I'm sure a lot of the parents that I worked for would have been like, oh, we can, you know, pay for you for a month, and then I don't really know what happens after that. And so I've thought about a lot of my characters, how they would deal with a time like this, and that really breaks my heart. But during it, yeah, I definitely allowed myself to feel all of those moments of frustration and heartbreak, but I'm a little bit severe when I'm writing. I like to keep it really focused on the plot.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's open up that question about the emotions. Let's take it to Renee. What did you feel reading it?
I think kind of a multitude of things. Some chapters I found that I kind of switched back and forth between the audio and then the on print, because my mom read it along with me, and she's like, I'm not an audiobook person. She's very book smart, which like did not get that. So we were kind of switching back and forth. And I noticed, specifically when I was listening to the audio, I was like almost uncomfortable in a lot of the scenes, because I was like, yeah, I've 100%, like, I've seen this happen. I've been a part of situations where this has happened. And I've been like, cool. I need to like kind of address when that happened, you know, and not only like, I don't want to say like do better from it, because that's very bland, but I will say that like what the book brought up for me consistently was that there is much more unlearning to be done than I even know right now. On the surface, like with the dad's comment on the air, about the promposal or whatever, and he went back and said, he was like, you know, I wasn't really thinking about it. I don't even know why I said it. And that made me think like he didn't actively think like, oh, it's because da 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 and da 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 da, but he just didn't acknowledge that was the forefront to make that comment. And it made me think like, you know, I wonder like things that I have said or thought or think and say currently, I wonder like if there's anything underlying in there that I haven't even addressed yet. And I'm kind of figuring out like, you know, especially by reading the book, because it's so centered around like every character and how they feel, not like Kylie, what you were saying about like how you feel about them. It was really easy for me to shift back and forth between their personas and understand that like, oh yeah, he said he wasn't actively thinking about it, but like he was, because it's ingrained and he said it for a reason. So it made me really uncomfortable in a really good way, to be quite honest.
Awesome. Miles, want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I flat out love this book. I laughed a lot harder than I thought I would during a pandemic, because some of the things were extremely relatable, especially Kylie, as you were talking about the postgraduate malaise of a 20-something who is losing their health insurance and has a group of friends who are more just upwardly striving in their careers, being a working actor in New York City, who had to bartend for a long time while being like, I'm still an actor. And my friends are like, yeah, I just became a VP, and yeah, so we're buying this apartment. I'm like, cool, great. I paid for my rent in cash, all singles for my bartending. That was definitely something I related to and something I could just enjoy. And yes, as Renee said, the unlearning that it really threw in my face of like, as the just like underlying microaggressions that we have or we don't even know we're doing, really made me think about a lot of my own behavior, the behavior of my friends, and the concept of just right and wrong, a lot of it. The morality of ownership, of what we are talking about when we talk about race and all that stuff. It really spoke to me. I really enjoyed this book.
Awesome. Tina?
Yes, I really enjoyed the book also, Kylie. But I I did feel a lot of times I felt like very embarrassed and ashamed by Alex, and recognizing myself in her, and a lot of other women that I know. You know, as a working mom, I worked a lot when my oldest was a baby, and so I think I will say, like, I've always treated caregivers like you are the most important coworker I will ever have. But like I know those kind of people who are like nickel and dime caregivers. Child caregivers are like the most important people in our children's lives, and to like not give them insurance and like give them like piddly hours like that, just it made me very ashamed and embarrassed to be a white woman. But at the same time, I could tell I identified with Alex because I hated Kelly from jump. I was like, I know what you are, sir. Like, I just felt like he was so full of it. So.
I'm sorry. I'm here.
Um,
That's all. This is all the emotions I wanted, so that makes me very happy.
It's interesting you say you hated Kelly from the jump, because one of my favorite moments in the book, and this is when I was listening to it on Audible or audio or whatever you want to say, was the second that you addressed that there were people walking through the grocery store. I immediately knew the second I heard it, I was like, I know exactly what's going to happen. And I didn't expect Kelly to like pull out his phone and take that point of view. But then the minute that it started to unravel, that like, he was like, well, don't you want this? And like, I was like, I was like, yep, no. Like, not a fan of yours. I totally know what you mean.
Oh, there was one other specific moment that brought me deep shame in a good way, which is in the grocery store. I think maybe older, like maybe slightly older than me, white woman who's standing there being like, well, I'm just going to keep an eye on all this. And then when the cops come or whoever, she's like, well, I'm going to let you guys take it from here. And I was like, that sucks. That was very painful and recognizable as a behavior. If I haven't personally exhibited, I've certainly been witness to.
That makes me very happy, as the first chapter took a lot. There was a lot of choreography going on there. But when I first wrote it and I gave it to a friend, the woman in the store was kind of nuts and like a McSweeney's character and just like screaming at Amira. And you know, in the first part of writing something, showing it to someone and they say to you, you know, what if it was even more insidious? And she was like, I'm just making sure this person's safe. I'm just making sure everything's okay. And those are the words that we use to talk about money and race without actually talking about it. And so making her really concerned and just a solid citizen was a lot more cringy, but you know, a lot more calming. As soon as there's poise involved, I think things can get really tricky. So I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah, I think in reading it, I felt seen. I'm 25 years old and a Black woman, and I've never been a nanny or babysitter, but my roommate, who I've lived with for the past 3 years, is a nanny. So I've heard a lot of stories. And we have a question here about code switching and if we've done it in our lives. But when I saw that question, my first thought was I had a lot of mixed emotions when Amira didn't want to share the video. And I was like, why doesn't she want to share the video? I started going over and over it in my head. And I thought, oh, you know what? She didn't really code switch. She seemed so upset in that moment that the code switching that she probably would have done didn't happen. And if there was a video of me in a similar situation, I think the code switching would be an issue for me. I'd be like, I don't want people to hear me talking like that in the wrong environment. So that was one of my favorite moments and something that stuck with me through the whole thing. But I'm gonna pass that question to you, Kylie, about code switching and when you've done that in your own life.
Yeah. Also, I love that you're like my ideal reader at 25 and acting and New York and whatnot. Yeah, code switching is really interesting because, and it's funny hearing the question, it's like, do you do it? Do you not do it? And I think that it is such an ingrained thing. It's kind of like racism in that it's not a choice. It is a response to being in a white place. And as a Black woman, you know, well, first there's the switching you do when you know, talk to your friends or in an interview and talk to a dog. There's just all those different cadences your voice takes on. But when I go into a white space, I never tell myself, okay, you know, get ready to, you know, you just do it in a way that you understand is the way that people think of what professional is and the best way that you can get what you want to do. I think you're right. And in that instance, Amira, there's a lot of things going on. Amira doesn't want to be seen being angry on this tape because being angry for a Black woman looks much different than it does for a white woman in many cases. And she's looking for a job and she doesn't want that to be her calling card. She also is just feeling like I'm not ready for everyone to know that I make my money this way and I have to drop whatever I'm doing on a Saturday night to go and make this happen. I think she sees herself as a before photo in a lot of instances and she's just not ready for that. But I also, you know, I don't know what I would do if I was Amira, but I also would think about like, okay, do I want to give the internet this video? Because once you do, that is it. And the internet will see you in whatever way that they see you. And so I was interested to do code switching there, and also with Tamra later, because I believe that some of the most painful code switching is with elite Black people who are trying to be really down. And Tamra is an example of that. You know, she wants this girl to think she's cool, but she also wants her to be someone different. And so it's probably why I'm a writer. I'm obsessed with dialogue and language, and that was one of the ways that I wanted to explore it.
Yeah, Tamra's character really took me through it. I know a lot of people like that. And I think one of the things that I loved about the book as well is all of the different Black people. And so many times we get caught up in Black people being a monolith when we aren't. And Alex's need for validation from Tamra on all of these issues with Amira, I think speaks to the problem with having one Black friend. We talk about like the person, oh, I have a Black friend, so it's fine. But I loved how this book kind of dug into that in a lot of different ways. Megan, you want to comment on that in any way?
Yeah, the thing about this book that I feel like I identified with was just like people telling Amira what to do and like how to live and what to be and like what to want without ever actually listening to her. And I feel like when people do that to me, it makes me so angry. Like I hate being told what to do. And I'll probably just do the opposite just to be petty. And it was interesting because like even Tamra thought that she knew what was best for Amira because she's a Black woman, because she's successful, which is in the same way of like Black people aren't a monolith, and just because you're Black doesn't mean that you know what other Black people want or need. In the same way that like Alex and Kelly had their ideas of what they thought Amira should want her life to be without ever actually hearing what she had to say for herself. Okay.
Andre, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think one of the most disturbing things reading this book was just a cringe fest of just crazy proportions. I identified with every single character. Like I was like, oh, that's me, oh, that's me too. But one of the things that really overwhelmed me was the limits on Amira's agency and how it was happening from all these different directions. Like the boyfriend needed her to be one way, and the boss needed her to be one way, and her friends needed her to be one way. And it was this, you know, it was this juggernaut where you're just hoping that eventually this person is going to get to the place where they're like, wait, this is what I want for me. And finally, you know, the epilogue, you do get a sense that she does that. And interestingly enough, it's doing what she has been doing, but for a boss who allows her that agency. And I really appreciated that. That was interesting. As like a wardrobe person too, I couldn't stop thinking about while she's being filmed, it's not just, you're talk about code switching. She's being filmed in two different capacities because she's in party mode in appearance. Like her wardrobe is saying like, I'm out to do this, but she's actually in the store doing something else, and there's a mixed message being sent by the visual. So I totally understand her, you know, that crazy disconnect between do I want this out there, and is this portraying me, and am I projecting my truth into the world or not? It definitely it creates a lot of internal conflict, you know, when you experience that.
We have a fan question that I'm going to throw first to Tina. Who is more problematic, Alex or Kelly?
Well, Alex is more problematic because she is unfair employer. She's not this person who's loving her child and taking loving care of her child. She's not offering her health insurance. She's not engaging with her except for when it works for her. And even though I empathize, you know, I think also, Kylie, the way you lay out her backstory is really well done with the story of what happened to her in high school and how, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, you know, you hear the story about her first time, and then these kids show up, and from her point, she says, and then I called the police because I was nervous and I don't think I don't think you find out the race of the person till later, and it's kind of like the way she likes to tell us her story, but what her story really is. But I also felt bad for her in that flashback because she was really young, and I do think it was genuinely complicated. Like but anyway, short answer is she's worse in this particular story. I was very relieved when Amira broke up with Kelly, but Alex is worse.
Renee, what do you think?
I mean, I agree. I think Alex is definitely more problematic, but it kind of for me, a lot of what I kept thinking about when I was thinking about the two characters, specifically Alex and Kelly, like there's a big concept and emphasis right now, specifically on like white saviorism and like who's gonna outdo, like, and that I think people think it's coming from, like, I don't know, maybe when you're in that body, you think you're doing the right thing, which is actually the problem. And watching them go back and forth on each other when they're sitting in that restaurant, or not watching, but like watching them in my mind, you know, seeing them go back and forth, I was just like, I'm so uncomfortable because I see both of you coming from the place of like trying to get the other one for something that you're actually just ashamed about. And it was just such a projection of like this is another human being. And it's like this like ownership sort of like property thing that I was like, this is not sitting right with me. But then at the end, when Kelly said to Amira, like, you know, the only one that doesn't like that you're still babysitting is you, I was like, all right, cool. So you did that. I was like, you did that. And then of course, then, you know, it was like that comment. And then when Alex says like, oh, well, you know, if she wasn't wearing that, then like the thing would have never happened in the first place. I was like, so you said that too. Cool. So like, you know, I've seen you both in your specific emotion with your headlights on, right, in your path. But then when you get to like looking on the outside of like not in their brain, specifically with the way that you wrote it, and then you hear those two comments, I was like, yeah, so that's what we don't see at first, because we see the inside of them, and then you take it to the end where you can then hear some that they said, and you're like, oh yeah, got it, clocked it, I knew where that was coming from. So yeah,
I think Alex is such an interesting character, and especially how we get to meet her and hear what's going on with her, because you can tell it is coming from a good place, and she is kind of checking herself often. She's like, oh, I shouldn't think this, but I do. Or she's always double checking, even at the end when she's talking to her friends, like, did I do the right thing? Did I do this? Because I think she knows in her soul that maybe even if it is the right thing, what are the intentions? Or is she hiding behind good intentions to get something else that she wants? I am going to throw this question to Andre. What should Alex have done to be a better ally from the start?
Boy, I think I find myself thinking a lot about agency here, and there's a lot of questioning that needs to happen, I think, as an ally, and questioning and listening. And I thought both Alex or Alix, did anyone? Yeah, if I listened to the book, so there's a before and after, and in the audio version, she's Alix. once once she leaves high school. So that's a whole talk about code switching. But listening to what Amira has to say, like he, after during the Thanksgiving, I don't want to be here. There's all of this thing he needs to, or he should have created a space for her to make a decision, and she had to I think it's after where she has to really come on strong and say, look, step back. This is my life. You can't tell me what to do, whether I can work, I need this job. He was so emphatic about knowing what she needed to do with her life. And I think what I've learned, in this time where we're all kind of grappling with these issues, is that one, the casual nature of the oppression. It can be so casual, and and your intentions may be completely blameless, and it's very easy to not be innocent, but to be naive. And I think you can do something with really good intentions, and the effect of it is really negative. And I think thinking about the effect of our actions, I think, is a very important thing to do. Not necessarily, oh, this isn't what I meant, but regardless of what you intend, could that affect someone negatively? Would anyone else agree with that?
Yeah. Kylie, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I also think it's important to step back a little in terms of Alex as the ally. And, unfortunately there's being an ally, but there's also just, a bare minimum of being an employee. And I think that Alex doesn't have those things down just yet. Alex is one of those characters that I love that has a problem accepting that she's in a position of power. She's had interns before, she's had, white people working for her before, but the fact that Amira, this is her whole livelihood, I think it makes Alex really uncomfortable. And so I don't know if I want to pull being an ally into that conversation with Alex, because what she needs to do is be a good employer and let her employee go home whenever she wants to, when she can clock out. She needs to make sure that she has health insurance, that she has a 2 weeks notice. And when it comes to, Kelly and Alex, who's more problematic, I completely agree. It's Alex, because she has more power in this. At the same time, the most racist thing that happens to Amira in this entire book is not what Alex does to her or what the security guard does to her. It's the fact that she lives in a world where her employment is tied to her health insurance. And that, the whole book, she can't go, to the doctor. And that is a racial act of violence due to hundreds of years of slavery. And I think that, that's the bad guy in this book, which allows me to let my characters act so poorly, because they're, filtering through these systems. And so as much as, I want Alex to focus on being an ally, I just don't think that she's there yet. She needs to learn how to work. But when I look for places where she could be an ally, there's one place where Tamara says, oh my gosh, I would never send my kids to public school because they might end up like this. Tamara, you're a principal, girl. What? More than anybody about the effects of funding in schools. And on a really individual level, that would be a moment for Alex to be like, let's talk about that. Why do you think that? I think those are moments where Alex could step up for sure and maybe try and address the people who she's calling friends.
Absolutely. Megan, you want to speak to that?
Yeah. I've been, I think a lot of people have been doing this, but I've been following a lot more Black voices on Instagram lately, especially Black historians, Black activists, and just reading what they have to say. And there seems to be a lot of some mistrust of being why is everyone doing this now? Of why did I get, 20,000 new followers the week after George Floyd was murdered, because Black people have been murdered by police officers since America began. What makes this different? And so seeing this book, it's well, this is why people don't always trust well-intentioned white people, because like, what are Alix's intentions? Like, why now? Why didn't she want to just get to know the person that's raising her daughter before her husband said something racist on TV? Like, why couldn't she have just done that before? And so it's kind of like having to like read what someone's doing like face value, and then also having to try to like be like, well, what could they also be gaining from, you know, proximity to you? And I think the same thing with like Kelly is, of course, he's not as problematic as Alix, but I maybe think that Kelly doesn't have as much self-awareness to be like, am I racist? Even though I have all these black friends, I date black women, like he's dating a black woman, but he's not listening to her. So like, does he have the mindset of being like, I'm also a part of this, in a way that Alix like knows she's a part of it and doesn't want to, but also doesn't really know how to make it better. And so I feel like there's like a weird, like, I don't think that Kelly's worse, but I think his stuff is more subtle a lot of the time, which is harder to like pinpoint exactly where people have biases.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the subtleties in this book, and my mom is reading it right now. And I was talking, and she's a African American literature professor. So I was talking to her about the subtleties and how even what the husband says on air, it's like that maybe wouldn't have made everyone mad. But like I feel like I see things like that in my daily life all the time, that if I was to get hung up on things like that, I wouldn't be able to live my life. So I just kind of roll my eyes and keep going. And so I appreciate that all of those little things are built into this, and everyone's thoughts about it. I was very struck by the casual kind of integration of colorism, or the idea of colorism in the book, and that Kelly does date all these Black girls, but it's said that most of them are super light skinned with like a loose curl pattern, and that's the kind of girl he ends up with at the end. And the character of Shawnee, who Amira is super aware that all of the men, whenever they go out, are trying to get Shawnee and not necessarily her. I'm interested to know what kind of responsibility, if any, you feel as a Black author in writing this story.
Yes, colorism is something that I'm super interested in, so I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, one of my professors in grad school always said, and I think about it all the time, he's like, your idea, of course, is to tell a good story, but it's also to describe things so accurately that it's almost haunting, and it's really uncomfortable truths that stick with people. And so when it comes to colorism, I think it's my job as an author to depict things as they happen, and not just the way that I want them to happen for my main character. I mean, the scene in the beginning of the grocery store, that would be a different situation for me, a light-skinned woman, than it is for Amira. Colorism has existed for a long time, from, you know, history of certain light-skinned slaves being kept inside the house. There's so much that just like goes just from that example of what people feel comfortable with to our previous president and what people consider professional. And so I think it's my job as an author to depict all of those instances. And you're right, from the beginning, Amira says, you know, it's good he didn't come. He probably liked Shawnee. And she doesn't even know about his past, but she just assumes that he would like her friend. And I think that is something that a lot of Black women carry. I have to say, like, you know, with the fact that this is going to be a film, it's really exciting to think about that. But I also look at other films that I'm like, oh, she was really dark in the book. Now she's not. That's interesting. That is all due to slavery and racism for hundreds of years. And so I hope that I depicted it in a way that seemed realistic. And I think that the way that it's realistic is an uncomfortable read for the most part.
Yes. And you brought up the movie. Is there anything else you want us to know about that? I know we're all really excited.
I mean, I'm excited too. I love film, and so I can't wait to see it. I mean, it's such a different thing, you know, when you're writing a scene. Like one of my favorite scenes in the book, probably because a friend told me I should be writing in a different perspective, was when you see Amira's bedroom from Alex's point of view, and that wasn't added in the beginning. And it was such a rich opportunity to show all of those things that you get in college, like the IKEA, like plastic shelving unit and all of those things, but she's still using them. And it just really was like a joy to depict her whole room. And I love that in film you get to do that in 2 seconds. And so I am executive producing, but I'm letting the experts take their role in writing it. And I'll probably just come in and like raise hell every once in a while. I'm so excited to see what we can do on screen. And I hope it's even more awkward on screen. Yeah.
Miles, do you have any thoughts about the movie? Are you excited about it?
Yeah, I'm always excited for new content, having exhausted all of Netflix and other aspects during quarantine. I guess specifically a question about the movie, and also one of the little side things that I noted, and I was like, I need to ask her about this. When Alex loses her virginity, you specifically use Counting Crows, a Counting Crow song. Is that a Cruel Intentions reference by any chance to that film?
Okay, so I actually wanted it to be another Counting Crow song, and then when I did research, I saw that that Counting Crow song came out literally 2 months after they lost their virginity. So I wanted it to be another one, but then I brought it back. But Cruel Intentions meant a lot to me, and so did that song. I think I wrote a paper about it in an English class, but I hope is never found. And so I'm really glad that you picked up that era of time, because it was very significant to me.
Well, that is my time, and also it was a very like a pointed, almost poking like my entire millennial psyche in the face, being like, I know who you are. And I was like, yep, we all saw that movie. We all dreamed of possibly losing our virginity to Colorblind by Counting Crows. We all wanted to be Reese Witherspoon. I get it. So
I think that was like what my paper was about. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
I just had to like say that's one of my favorite things. That's another thing that completely brought me joy about the book. So.
Okay, y'all, we're gonna start to wrap this up. Tina, do you have any last burning thoughts?
Yes, I wanted to say, Kylie, thank you for this book, and I'm excited about the movie too. And I encourage you to raise hell the whole process and speak up every turn. And I thought you would find it amusing that after I read the book, my copy of the book had a little sticker on it that says Reese's Book Club, like Reese Witherspoon's book club. And I called my manager and I was like, "Who bought this book? Does Reese already have this book?" And he was like, "Actually, Lena has it." And I was like, "Oh, that's better.
That's good."
This book doesn't need to be made from Alex's point. This movie doesn't need to be made from Alex's point. But I'm so happy that you're going to be a voice in the process and tell them everything your gut tells you to say it.
Okay, that is great advice. They're going to hate it, but I'm going to do it because I don't want to mess it up. So yeah, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, Kylie, we've so enjoyed having you. Any last things you want to say?
No, thank you so much. I mean, I wish I could see Mean Girls on Broadway in person. It meant a lot to me when I was 17 years old, and I'm so glad that it is in this format. Cheers to you guys for keeping this going as well as you can when you can't be on stage. And thank you very, very much. This has been really lovely.
Thank you. Yes, once we're back, we want to have you. Thank you so much, everyone, to the fans, to everyone here in our panel today. We encourage you all to continue the conversation on our social media channels, on your social media channels, with your friends, and around your dinner tables. Everywhere that you can, keep talking. Until next time, thank you so much, Kylie Reed. Everyone, have a good day.